right. Was is ach, kinderlach? What's up, Lior and friends? Lior just began learning and following poker. He watched a little bit of a session of mine last night. If you can see Lior, we're up a little over a few $100. And this is how the software looks when I play. It tells me that in 520 hands in that session, I was up about $191. It gives me my expected equity was to be up $144, which means this is only based on the all in. It's not based on every single level, but based on the point where I got it all in, I was expected to be up $144. So I actually ran $47 or so better than expected. That happens. That evens out over time. You'll have periods where you run better. You'll have periods where you run worse, of course. And these are all my hands in reverse chronological order here. We'll put them in chronological order for you for the day, just so you see that the majority of hands, as you're getting used to things, you'll notice the majority of hands are all, this is my result over here. My cash one, down 25. That's a small blind, down 25, up to, not a lot of, a lot of like small pots, but over the course of 500 hands, those small pots will allow for some bigger pots. Here's a few bigger down pots actually. $10, $12. This is 50 NL. So the small blind is 25 cents. The big blind is 50 cents. But you'll notice, look, here's a big hand of $55. And what I usually like to do at the end of a session or at the end of a day is I like to look at my best and worst hands. So those are going to be the hands for review, to see how I'm playing, to see what I did right, what I did wrong. Those are usually hands where I win or lose $15 or more. It's a winning session, so there'll be more winners than losers today, which will be fun. But I always look at the losers first. So let's check out this first one. I don't remember these, which is fun also, because you get to see them in real time. But let's make this bigger for you. All right, so we're pocket tens in a small blind. Now, before anything happens, we should always train ourselves to think about our position first. The small blind is the worst position at the table, and any other information that we may know at the table. This table, it would seem like the big blind over here, a very small sample size, but in 21 hands, has been moderately active or less active than average. So if it folds to me and I get to raise on him, I probably would. Again, with hands like pocket tens, I'd probably be raising no matter what. But it's just important, to just kind of see things before the action happens. When I'm playing live, which is where I usually play, I always look at my cards only when I have to. At the when it's my turn to make a play, and in the meantime, I'm looking at other people, trying to put them on ranges and thinking about, what kind of hands they'd be raising with, folding with, limping with, calling with, and thinking before I look at my cards. Okay, I'm going to be three betting, I'm going to be re-raising with these hands, calling with those hands, folding with those hands. So, in any case, so the first three guys fold, and it comes to the button. Now, remember, when a button raises. When a button raises, he's most likely, the button, by the way, if you see over here, in a very small sample of hands, he's raised 38% of the time. It's 13 chances to raise first, and he's raised 5, and he's raising from the button, which means that he's very likely to be raising with a very wide number of hands, probably close to 50% of hands in this situation, based on my very limited playing with him. And so I am getting probably prepared, if I'm not mistaken, to be re-raising or three betting any raise. And let's see how that goes. He raises to 3x, 3 times the big blind. And I re-raise to 6. And again, when I'm out of position, which I am here, I try to re-raise it a little bit bigger. I like getting folds before the flop if I can, but that's the situation, all right? And now here's something very interesting. Now the big blind re-pops to 15. Now that's a lot of strength. Well, maybe not actually. If he's a smart player, which he may be, he may say to himself, this guy is raising about half the time. And then he may look at me and say, this guy is going to be three betting a lot, which is true. And so therefore he could be four betting light, with less than a premium. But, he hasn't three bet in 21 chances in 5 chances so far. So to four bet here it's possible, but it's unlikely. That weights his raise more towards strength. That being said, when this guy gets out of the way, when my pocket tens is too strong of a hand to be folding here. In the moment, I think calling was probably my only option. But as I'm thinking about this now, I wonder if this may have been a shove, meaning an all in. But in any case, what I did was call. Now this flop is interesting. This flop, on the one hand, the first question when you see a flop is whose range does it favor? Okay. Now as he 3-bet me, he has a lot of this range, and as he 4-bet me, he has a lot of this range or overcards to this range. He could have aces, he could have kings, he could have queens, jacks. But I also, as a raise and call, have a lot of middle to high cards in there. So I would argue that this it probably favors him a little bit, but it's a pretty range neutral board. And so that's important to note. Either way, I'm going to check 100% of the time, or nearly 100% of the time to him because he had the aggression, the last aggression before the flop. So I'm going to play, it's called playing in flow. I'm going to check to him in flow and see what he does. So I check and he checks behind. Now this is interesting. When he checks behind, when he checks behind, you're usually checking on a board like this in a situation like this, either with a monster or the frustrated miss. So now it's very interesting. In the moment, I didn't realize this, but I have 2 very important cards. I got pocket tens. Why is that important? Is because I have blockers to the nuts. The nuts in this hand is 10-9. And I have two of the tens to make 10-9. So I'm not sure this is a board that I want to bluff on, but it's something that you want to consider is the cards that you have and how they interplay with the board. So, when we were talking about the ranges, I should add that the nuts 10-9 I have. That being said, I'm not sure 10-9 is 3-betting and then calling like I did here. So, he could probably safely take me off 10-9, but just interesting things to think. The 7 rolls off with a diamond. And here, if I was going to do anything, this is the time to do it. Is to make a bet or to make an overbet shove even. But I chickened out here. I think that's, it may not be a mistake, but either way, if I'm going to make a move, that was the place to have made it. He shoves all in, and I can't call over here. Even if I'm ahead of a hand like ace king offsuit, if one of those suits is a diamond, he still has plenty of equity against me. So this was a fold. Okay. Good, that's one hand. We'll go quicker through the next hands, but just so you see. All right, next hand, ace jack offsuit. Let's look at this one. Again, here we're in the small blind again. Position is not great over here. And it looks like the big blind, player 6, has been playing a lot of hands. He's been calling a lot of hands. He's not very aggressive. He's a great player to play with in that he calls a lot, but doesn't often push the envelope and put you in bad situations. If he's betting, he generally has it. Folds to me, I'm going to raise this 100% of the time. That's not true. Every once in a while, I'll try to be crafty and limp raise or maybe even just limp call. But in this situation, I raise, he calls, and the flop comes ace 10 jack. Now, that's giving me top pair on a very, very confusing board. Normally, I would say, if I raise and he calls, that I have a slight range advantage. I have top pair, I'm slightly ahead of his range rather. But his calling range has tons of middling cards, that contain jacks, that contain 10s, that contain 8s, that contains 9s, which would be give him an open-ended draw. That could have made straights already, queen 9, 9, 7. This guy calls a lot. So, he's maybe even, although I'm ahead of his range, he has a lot of the nut hands that I don't have. So I bet small, or I bet a little above average. I bet a little over half the pot, which is a larger bet, and he calls. A larger bet for the flop. Turn is a blank in the sense that, although it adds another flush draw to the board, and that he does have many hands that contain 2 hearts in his range. Other than that, this doesn't really change the texture of the board. If he was ahead before, he's ahead now. If I was ahead before, I'm ahead now. I bet 2/3 pot, again, trying to push bigger, because if he's got a draw, I want to charge him for it. And he calls again. A river's a 7. That's an annoying card because any hand that he has with a 9 is turned into a straight. So over here, I probably go into check call mode is my guess. I check because this guy, he plays so many hands, that he could have a 9. He could also have a hand like a queen 10. There are hands that I'm ahead of as well. And when he bets $8 into a pot of 15, he's basically offering me 2-to-1 to call. So if I'm ahead 33% of the time, then even if I'm losing, more than half the time, I can still call this profitably as long as I think I'm ahead 33% of the time. And I'm thinking here, what am I beating? I'm beating diamond flush draws that he may have had. He may have had a hand like ace eight, nine, eight. He may have had like ace eight, king eight, with two diamonds or something like that. He may have had a heart draw that turned the flush, that turned something, a heart draw with a pair. He could have something like king 10 of hearts that picked up a flush draw, and ace 10 of hearts, those kinds of hands. There are a bunch of hands that he could have, queen 10. There are a bunch of hands that he could have that I beat. And of course, he's got tons of hands that beat me. Any 9, any jack 10, any jack 8, anything like that. So in any case, though, I in the moment decide that I have better than, probably 35 to 40% of the time I'm ahead here. Plus, crazy player like this could have bluffs. And so I call, and I am no good. He turns over 7-5, which again, fits very well. If he's playing 7-5 this way, he just as easily could have had all those other hands that I beat. And which means that even though I was wrong in this instance, we can't be results driven. We have to be theory driven. And, a player like this, I think I was correctly calling on the river. If he was going to be playing hands like 7-5, that means there's a lot of other hands, there's a lot of other hands, jack 5, jack 5, jack 6, I don't know. I don't want to go into all of them, but there are a lot more hands that he could have. And unfortunately, he went runner. He called me with nothing pre-flop and on the flop. On the turn, he hit a 5, and he called me, and he called with that as well. And on the river, unfortunately, I check called, but he happened to get there. So okay, that happens, but that's another hand that we lost. Here was the hand of the night that I lost. This is a hand I remember that I played poorly, and I wanted to look at this afterwards. If you see over here in this situation, I am in the cutoff, but I have a 25% blind there. Why? Is I accidentally sat out, and so to come back in, it cost me a small blind to play. So that ends up hurting me. So this guy limps. This guy limps. I limp. Suited connectors, bad suited connectors. I have to be careful. If I hit a flush, there's lots of better flushes that can beat me. And if I hit a straight, I can end up with a straight on a board like 4, 5, 6, and there's 7s and 8s. That type hand, so I can flop the idiot end of the straight draw also, but I call, especially now, that there's a type player behind me, and he did fold, that I'll likely have position on the hand, and it's a 5-way limp pot. Now, by the way, in a 5-way limp pot, before we look at the flop, which is obviously favorable for us, a 5-way limp pot is significant because that means everybody has pretty much uncapped ranges. To limp from early position. This guy likes to limp a lot. He's limped a third of the time. This guy likes to limp a lot. This guy limps all the time. These two guys can have pretty much anything. And by the time it comes to these two guys with 3 limpers ahead of them, they could be limping with any 2. So even though this is why I played this hand wrong. Spoiler alert, is even though even though it looks like I flopped a monster here because of this limp pot with 4 really, really wide ranges, there's lots of better 2s here. And it's rare that you're going to be in a hand with lots of better 2s, but this is one of them. And I should have listened to what the other person was telling me. Any case, this guy bets $1.15 to $2.50. We get 1 fold, we get a call, and it comes to me. Now, I'm going to assume here, I'll tell you what I'm thinking right now. Hopefully I was thinking the same thing in the moment. I'm thinking, okay, I got a monster. I'm thinking it's unlikely that there's somebody else with a 2, although it's wrong. But it is very likely that there's somebody with a king out there, if there are 4 of us. And it's also very likely there's somebody with a flush draw. And the flush draw, I'm really scared of. So I want to charge people from calling with a flush draw. And I want to, get paid off by kings, flush draws. Even middle pairs may call on a board like this, 7s, 8s, 9s. I guess anything queens through 3s, although probably 9s plus is raising pre-flop, or even 7s plus is raising pre-flop, although this is a very passive table if you look at these 2 players. So I'm probably going to raise here because I want to either take it down now or take control of this board while denying equity to flush draws and stronger hands. So here I raise, you get 2 folds, and then this guy re-raises me. Now here's where this should have set off alarms in my head, because this guy it's only 34 hands, but he really has not been very aggressive, but he has called a lot. And players that call a lot but aren't aggressive, when they get aggressive with you, you really want to take note. But in any case, I'm thinking right now, if he's re-raising me, it's probably with a flush draw. It's probably with kings. It's unlikely he's got a stronger 2. So I call. And I actually thought about re-raising him here too, which I'm glad I didn't. All right, flop is turn is a blank, and he leads small into me. Now, this is a bet. A small bet like this means one of two things. Either he's really trying to get me to re-raise him, and he's going to monster, or he's trying to get to the river cheaply. So a lot of flush draws will do that. 3-5 theoretically can do that, but other than 3-5 of clubs, there's really no straight draws on this board. 3-5 of clubs could certainly play this way, but that's the only real straight draw out there. So I bump it up, and I bump it up small because I'm probably setting up. I bump it up smallish because I want to build the pot. The pot is currently 43. When he calls, it'll be 51, and then he'll have about 48 left. So I'm betting small because I want to keep him in and hopefully keep him around. So that the stack sizes work out that I can shove all in on the river. But he re-raises me, ruining that plan. I really should have been paying attention. He's screaming to me that he's got a monster. But at this point, I just call. And I have to call here, but maybe I should have called the 5 before. I really should listen. What I learned from this hand is that when I'm playing against a passive player and they're showing aggression, listen. Although that could be the results talking. Because had he had a flush draw, if you would be playing a flush draw like this, then I would look like a genius. But in any case, so I call, and the river is a 5. Relative blank. Ace-3 of clubs gets there, and ace-3 of clubs is possible to be here as well. In addition to the 3-5 of clubs, ace-3 of clubs certainly could play this way as well. And this guy that's certainly in his range with the number of hands he plays. But I'm ahead of all kings still. I'm ahead of all his busted flushes, and so he checks. I guess at this point I was a little nervous. Yeah, the stack sizes are such that I really should be shoving all in, but he checks, and I don't see what's calling me at this point. The flush draws are not going to call if I bet. Even some kings may not call if I bet. But all those other hands that beat me do call. So at this point, at least I have the good sense to check behind me, which I do. And he turns over the good old 7 deuce, which he turns over the good old 7 deuce. Ali, the camera's on, by the way. Oh, he turns over the good old 7 deuce, which beats me. So there's that. And he drags the pot. All right, let's look at the last one that I lost. And then we'll get to the winners. But you see, he had, now again, 7 deuce is a terrible hand that he had, but in that situation, the way the hand played out, I really should have had that in his range, and I really could have lost less, I think, although that could be results oriented. So let's see over here. I'm in the cutoff again with my favorite hand in poker, Jack 10 suited. I'm facing a raise from this guy. This guy's been raising a healthy amount. I can see myself calling or 3-betting here, re-raising here. In this situation, I just call. Folds to the folds through, and now flop comes queen 10-6. Now this favors his range, but my range has a lot of I have 6s, I have 10s. He obviously has pocket queens, aces, kings, ace queen, all those hands. But I'm certainly alive here on this, and he misses this flop plenty as well. So when he bets small, 179, when he bets about half pot, this is an easy call to me. Turn is great. Turn brings me, turn gives me a lot more equity. It gives me an open in that straight draw. Any king, any 8, give me the straight. So when he bets 523, I can see myself calling or raising. The problem is one of the most likely hands that he has are queen hands. King queen, where king queen where half of the straights that would come in would give him a better straight than me. And he's ahead of me. So I don't think I can fold out the queens, and so I think I just call here, which I do. And the river comes a beautiful 8 or so, I think. He bets almost full pot. Now, in general, I have to be careful. At these stakes, almost full pot is a real big show of strength. And if he's betting strength, chances are he has a jack like me. So really, I can't fold this, but I should be calling this. But unfortunately, in the moment, I make a mistake, and I raise, I shove all in, and he calls. And even though I have the second nuts, he turns over the absolute nuts, king jack. And in this case, I can't blame his poor play or anything else. He just absolutely outplays me in this situation. So good. So those are the hands that I lost, and they stink, but thankfully, there are far more hands that we won. Now, I think I'm going to have to go and watch this one in a second. So let's look at a hand or two. Allie, what's your ETA? 3 minutes. Let's so we can see a hand or two in that time. So this is a big one. We'll start with the bigger ones for the night. All right. This situation, I am on the button over here, and this is a wilder table. If you look, not this guy, but this guy and this guy have been very active. So when it folds to this guy who raises, and this guy has been, raising almost, when he's first enter a pot, he's been raising almost 40% of the time, and in late position, and we've had some history together. I am definitely calling. I am not re-raising with A7. Maybe you can, but against a better player, I would consider 3-betting sometimes, because I don't mind if he 4-bets me throwing away a hand like A7 that's dominated by a lot of stronger aces. But in this situation, I just call. The big blind gets out of the way, and we see a beautiful flop. Queen 7-7. Doesn't get much better than that. So he's got the momentum. He's got the betting lead. He bet last. I just called. So he bets $1.20. Now, here's an important thing. You'll see as you watch me play more that I raise with a lot of draws. So meaning on a board like this, if I had diamonds, if I had middling diamonds or low diamonds, I'd be raising here. And the reason I do that is because I want to put pressure on the other guy. Now, if I only raise with my diamonds and my draws, then people will figure that out, and then people can put pressure on me and adjust accordingly. So I'll always mix in, raises with value also. All my sevens, all my sets of queens, over pairs, and things of that nature. And I try to have in this situation roughly a 2-to-1, if not even a 3-to-1 at this stage, roughly a 2-to-1 or 2.5 to 1 value to bluff ratio. And that's because I want to put them in a situation where when I raise, if you take a look, I raised to 490. So he's got to call 370 into a pot of 960. So he's got to call 33% of the time. I want to make sure if he's going to call 33% of the time that I have value at least 2/3 of that time. I'm trying to put pressure on him because of that reason. And so he calls, and now I have the betting lead. And also I'm beginning to swell the pot in case I can get him all in. Now, it's important to note here, when he calls me, he obviously doesn't think I have a 7 or thinks that, it's not the only thing that I could have. And he knows that I have a lot of diamonds in this range. And so therefore, he's going to have me in a lot of flush draws here, which means that I can probably get away with another bet. So he checks to me when this 4 of hearts comes. Nothing really changes on this board. A couple of hearts pick up equity. But, based on his raising before the flop, and me holding the ace of hearts, it's less likely that he's going to have a heart draw. And 5-6 really isn't in his range, which is only open-ended straight draw going on here. So chances are, he doesn't have, although I could have draws from his perspective, he doesn't have many draws here. He's probably playing with a hand like, with a hand that contains a queen or pocket jacks, pocket 10, something like that. I bet big. I bet 1148, and I bet larger. Usually I bet 2/3, but this guy's really, exploitable, and I'm trying to raise my bet size here. And I bet 2/3, and I want you to understand why I'm betting this. If he thinks I have a flush draw, which is very likely, I'm probably going to get called here. But more importantly is that when he calls, the pot's going to balloon to around $35, which will credibly lead me to, a little bit over a pot size bet, which means I can actually play for stacks here. And so he doesn't even give me that chance. He just eagerly shoves all in, probably thinking I have a flush draw. I'm excited. If he's got pocket queens, which he could have, so be it. Those 3 combinations of pocket queens will beat me. But it's very likely here that he's got either pocket queens, either a strong, queen, ace queen, king queen, thinking that he's ahead of my draw, or he's got a 7, which is also possible given how often he's playing hands, and he thinks he's got me snookered. But of course, I call, and he turns over. He turns over that he had another 7, and I take a relatively large pot for these stakes. All right, let's do one more, and we'll see if she's ready. Yeah, this is a nice and easy hand and a quick hand as well. I'm in the cutoff again. If you notice, if you notice, you're new to this, but if you notice, I'm playing a lot of late position, button and cutoff hands where I'm winning. That's where the money is. The money is when you're in position. I'm raising with them also because when I raise from this position, I get a lot of folds from the button. and therefore then I have position on everybody for the rest of the hand. Okay, so this guy limps. Now, if you look in 16 hands, he's limped nine of the 16 hands. So he's limping very light. So this is an obvious raise 100% of the time with the hand as strong as this. Obvious raise, button folds, small blind, re-raises all in, but he's only got $6 in a stack. He's got a tiny stack. He just lost a hand before. He's inconsequential. Of course, I'm going to call. Big blind folds, and now the hijack limper calls him. Now, interesting here. I have a few choices here. I can simply call and then play my equity, meaning if I get diamond draws, an ace or a king, and play it accordingly against this guy. But this guy really is a calling station, especially pre-flop. So I elect to overbet all in. Now, why do I do that? Two reasons. One is it looks very bluffy. And so I think that this guy with with weaker aces, ace queen, ace, maybe even as low as ace jack or ace 10 might call, but more likely he folds. And if he folds, I'm fine with that because then this 631 goes dead in the middle of the pot. It's dead money, and I'll be able to win about $19 where I'm only risking 631 with a hand that's more than half the time likely to win, for sure, against this guy's range. So range of hand. And so therefore, to me, this is what I elected to do. I can see calling sometimes also or raising smaller, but I decide, that's what I decide to do because I think he may end up calling. This looks bluffy. He may end up calling with a weaker hand, and to my delight, he calls. King comes in the flop, which is nice. Another king comes in the turn. Now I'm thinking that I won. And even though the flush comes in, it's most likely that I'm ahead, which, of course, in this situation turns out to be true. And look, it looks so bluffy. He called me with ace 9. Unbelievable. This other guy had ace queen. So he was, had them both notched for the stronger aces. And again, I probably had, when we got it all in, I probably had against this guy about 70% equity. And against this guy, probably also about 60, 68, 67% equity. And so, I got it in very good, and it was just, sometimes it is this easy. All right, I got to run right now, but, Al, you ready? Mm-hmm. But that's just, a little synopsis of how it works. I thought you'd enjoy. Thank you, my friend. Be well.